This podcast contains detailed plot spoilers, adult language, and mature themes. Listener discretion is advised. God don't kill people, I do. Welcome to a podcast of Rare Antiquities, episode 31. Today, we analyze those who may be a couple of cans short of a six-pack as we discuss the 2002 psychological thriller, Frailty. My name is Harry, and I'll be your host for today's show.
And my name is Geoff. I will be your co-host.
How are you doing today, Geoff?
I'm doing good, man. It's great to be back on the show, and, it's nice to get a chance to pay a little tribute to our good friend, what's his name?
Hudson. No, Paxton.
No, I jest. He's kind of one of those guys who never got the recognition he deserved, perhaps, as an actor. And so it's nice to have a show where we can pay a little tribute to him. It's unfortunate he's no longer with us, but sure gave us a lot to watch over the years. So
why don't we just talk about him now? Yeah, he's a great character actor. Yeah, definitely doesn't give a lot of recognition. Most of the time people just remember him as, Hudson from Aliens or the Dick in True Lies or his brief and yet brilliant cameo in the original Terminator. And that's pretty much from Geekland what a lot of people think of Bill Paxton, that's it. But he's done quite a bit more in his life and in his filmography. And, James Cameron utilized him quite a bit. And, a couple of those movies are James Cameron movies that I mentioned. But, he was utilized by James Cameron quite a bit. And then, he made a lot of other movies that are fairly recognizable, but sometimes a little bit more on the obscure side. How about yourself? When you think of Bill Paxton, what do you remember with respect to film?
I guess my favorite Bill Paxton character is Hudson from Aliens. That's just was such a great performance that he gave there, and that's one of my favorite movies. So that one obviously jumps to mind. I loved him as the sleazeball car salesman in True Lies. That was also a really good performance. He has that ability, just the way his face is, the way his smile is. He can look like a real dirtbag and pull it off. Unlike, not quite like anybody else can.
He's great charisma. He's a scene stealer in a nutshell. You can put him in any movie, and he's just a scene stealer. And I'm surprised he didn't get a lot more leading roles, and I'm not sure as to why that is. Maybe he just got shoehorned because, he played these kind of side characters.
Yeah.
And that's a little unfortunate, but we did review Near Dark late last year, and he stole the show in that movie, and he was pretty much what you could consider the lead, in a sense.
Yeah, he was at least the lead antagonist anyway in that movie, and he was terrific in that as well. The scene in the bar there was absolutely terrific in that. I think, to be a lead, part of it, when you're dealing with the confines of Hollywood, he doesn't have the leading man good looks that they like.
I always thought he was shorter, but the funny thing is when he stands next to other stars who are legitimately tall, he's standing right with them, unless he's sitting on a soapbox or he's got wearing heels. I don't think it was a size thing. I think it was, maybe you're just right. It's just maybe too much character in his face.
Yeah, he doesn't have the traditional good looks of your, traditional Hollywood leading men. And that's probably a lot of it. It's certainly not ability, because he's an excellent actor, lots of charisma, but I almost prefer it that way. We've got lots of leading men and they're all pretty cookie cutter. Bill Paxton is the salt on my egg whites, so I'd much rather have it that way.
Is that a good thing?
Yeah, well, who wants to eat egg? If you eat eggs,
I put pepper, man. So I don't know what the fuck you're talking.
You got to have both. I'm just saying he's the spice on my food. He's not the leading. He's not the egg. Like the egg is the leading role, but without the salt, then it's just an egg.
Okay. Maybe you're hungry. Get into this movie, but we talk about Frailty.
Yeah.
What are your memories? I recall that, again, we've talked about it before. We were working in a movie theater together, and I believe around now, can't remember if I was still working there, maybe towards the tail end at this time, and I was about to leave, but I think I had left. What do you remember about Frailty?
All I could remember when you brought it up was I could see the poster in my head. Matthew McConaughey's face, or half his face on the poster, and there's birds or bats or something flying across. And that was pretty much it. I wasn't sure if I had or hadn't seen it when brought it up. And then, after watching it here, I definitely did not watch it.
Well, this is the first time you've seen it.
Yeah, I had not.
This will be interesting then. Okay, that'll be good.
So that's about it. I just remembered kind of a psychological thriller, something to do with somebody hunting demons or something. I never watched it. You know, I wasn't a Matthew McConaughey fan, so it just flew right by me almost completely unnoticed.
Okay, so how about let's get into Matthew McConaughey, you know, every boy's favorite wet dream. I don't know about
True, it's true.
It's true. Yeah, I think it's true for you. I'm not a Matthew McConaughey fan. I just find, you know, he just comes across as one of those just very egotistical actors. You know, you don't know the guy in person. I'm just saying this is how I feel he is portrayed and how he portrays himself. And I really haven't enjoyed a lot of his roles. So, you know, that's kind of two strikes against him for me, and maybe I'm a little biased, and that's the case, that's fine. I haven't seen Dallas Buyers Club, and I know he did win an Oscar for that. And if it is a great performance in which it's earned, that's great and good for him, and he deserves all the credit in the world. But beyond that, in which again I haven't seen that movie. I can't recall a thing that I did like him in. I know you're a True Detective fan, and while I did enjoy season 1, I felt Woody was more of the star for me and the main attraction. What about Matthew McConaughey for you? What do you think as an actor? Any movies you particularly enjoy?
What about those fucking Lincoln commercials that he does? Jesus.
Okay, there's one movie I do like. Yeah, the Lincoln commercials are a little, you know, that's again, just I don't
talk about coming across like you're a total douchebag, you know, like doing those commercials. You know, we already know you're an elite white, you know, rich white douchebag. Like you don't need to advertise the fact that you are such, you know, so those commercials kind of bug me a bit. I am a fan of his. He's done so many terrible movies. Can't even count them all. I mean, the string of romantic comedies, that movie Sahara, remember that?
I remember. I don't think I've watched it. I remember it coming out. Yeah.
A Time to Kill, I think, is generally well regarded, although I hate it because I think it panders to its audience. And also is directed by Joel Schumacher, if I'm not mistaken. So
I think there's one movie that I do enjoy, and it's not really a testament to him, even though I think he did an okay job. It's more of a guilty pleasure, is Reign of Fire, the dragon.
Oh, I'm right with you there. Yeah. He was like, he didn't.
No, I think he stole the show from Christian Bale in that one. Bale played it pretty straight.
Yeah.
And just kind of like, you know, the reluctant hero, but he was kind of the star of that movie.
I agree. He just went for it because that movie is so ridiculous. Yeah.
I just love the ending. I just love how he meets his demise. I'm just going to stab this dragon as I fly into his mouth, and then he just dies. It's like smooth. Oh yeah, smooth movie cue ball.
That's a great standout for him. And yeah, I was a real big fan of True Detective, and I thought he was great. And not to take anything away from Woody in that, because I think I agree with you that Woody was probably the more standout performance there, because you don't really see that coming out of Woody Harrelson. I love Matthew McConaughey because they did a great job with the makeup, you know, between the two time periods. That was probably a big part of the performance that stood out for me in that show. But I thought he did a good job playing kind of both, you know, the young, disillusioned man and then the older, more disillusioned man afterwards. I thought was pretty cool. So, but yeah, I think he has a lot of talent. I think he has a lot of charisma, is certainly more your traditional leading man. And it is a bit surprising to me that it's kind of only now that he's figured out, I don't know if it's just how he figured out how to choose the right script, you know, to make. Interstellar I liked, although he didn't really do too much in that as from a performance standpoint. I thought he was good in it. I liked that movie. But yeah, you know, I'm a fan. But I don't seek him out, but I'll go watch him.
All right, but you got a name, and you can't include this one in case it is one of your more favorites, so you can't give your thoughts away. You named your favorite Bill Paxton movie, which is Aliens. Name your favorite Matthew McConaughey. You got to go off the top of your head. I already said Reign of Fire. What's yours?
My favorite Matthew McConaughey movie? Because of the movie or because of him?
Because of him. I think you'd have to do it that way. And you can't say True Detective. It's got to be a movie. And I think that proves my point.
No, I was just thinking, like, I really like his brief cameo in Wolf of Wall Street. That put a smile on my face.
Okay, yeah. You know what?
It was the one scene, but really...
He was good there. Yeah, that was funny.
We'll go with Wolf of Wall Street.
Let's talk about the genre. This Frailty is a psychological thriller, and we've already done ones that we could qualify into that category on the podcast. You know, The Game, Brazil, Jacob's Ladder. What are your thoughts on the genre, and what are your favorite psychological thriller movies movies out there. And what are the strengths of this genre and its weaknesses or drawbacks?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the strengths and drawbacks are you can really play a lot with perception of reality when you're playing around in this genre. So, Jacob's Ladder, I thought, did a good job, maybe not for the whole runtime, but for part of it where you're questioning what's really going on. The game is much the same way. And you can, if you're a good filmmaker, you can really effectively use that to build suspense and tension slowly over the course of your film without having to resort to, shootouts, explosions, violence, score, scares, anything. You can really just, if we're a good filmmaker, the right shot, the right lighting, the right performance, and you can really turn up the heat in so many subtle ways. And I think that's my favorite part of the genre. And done well, you're always asking questions. You never know what's around the corner. So I think those are the strengths. The weaknesses, though, is that most of these movies, they tend to fall into the same tropes. And I think part of that has to do with, just the 3-act structure of a movie, where they can play around in the first 2 acts and then, you got to wrap it up. And then everything tends to play out in much the same.
Exactly. And it falls into that trap where you have to kind of have a twist. Mm-hmm. And I think these kind of thrillers worked before, 60s, 70s. I mean, if you can consider, say, Psycho, Vertigo. Psycho has a bit of a twist at the end. Even though it's classified more as a horror movie, you could still say it's kind of a psychological thriller. Vertigo's another one. But then you have other big movies, that came after Fight Club, Seven, Usual Suspects. I guess a Fight Club, you would call that a psychological thriller.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Memento's another one. But they're always they always have these kind of twists that you now expect in the end. As these movies have now come and gone, I think that's probably one of the major drawback of the genre, is because the great thing is you can be creative in how you structure the movie, and people are second guessing, and they're on the edge of their seats and they're invested, and you can be very creative to draw somebody in. But as you're right, when that 3rd act hits, everybody's trying to look for clues prior to then, and then they're trying to guess what that twist is going to be now. And It'll be interesting. I'm interested to hear your thoughts if Frailty falls into that same trope and trap as well. So
yeah, we'll get to that. So as far as my favorites of the genre, I think The Game is probably my favorite of the genre. Fight Club is another one that's up there for me as well. And I think, as far as I like all of Alfred Hitchcock's work pretty much, I don't know that I could single one out, although Vertigo would be a great example, I think, of a psychological thriller. So those are some of the high marks for the genre for me. But what about you?
Yeah, no, well, my favorite definitely out of the whole bunch is American Psycho. I love that movie. Mm-hmm. It's not just a psychological thriller, it's also part satirical, and that's what I love about that. And I think I can still classify it as a psychological thriller. If I cannot, then Fight Club probably would be, or Psycho, the original Psycho. Again, some of these are gray area. Definitely Fight Club's a definite psychological thriller. Psycho is a horror, borderline psychological thriller. So if I can put it in that genre, I'll say Psycho as well. Otherwise, I'll just say, American Psycho and then Fight Club.
I would put those in psychological thriller territory. Psycho, in fact, the first one doesn't have a whole lot of horror elements to it, really. Not really. But
it is pretty much categorized as a horror.
Yeah,
across the board,
so.
Right? So that's the thing. So those are my favorites. With respect to Frailty, I didn't mention, I had seen this. I can't recall if it was in the theater. Might have been. I might have gone with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. I do remember this movie, and I have not seen it probably since it was in theaters. So I had indefinite memories from this movie, like certain images that popped out, especially when it related to Bill Paxton, and just him holding the axe and kind of remembering him being a bit crazy and off the wall and killing people. Couldn't remember the reasons why or anything else or how it ended. But once this movie started, it's oh yeah, I remember everything now. It started to all come back. So Any other thoughts, or should I get into the plot summary?
Let's jump in.
All right. In what very well could be the true behind-the-scenes story of the Flanders family, we see a gentleman named Fenton Meeks as he visits FBI agent Wesley Doyle, claiming he has information on the God's Hand serial killer. Fenton informs Agent Doyle that the killer is in fact his brother Adam, but Adam has since committed suicide, prompting Fenton to come clean about the killings, and that he has buried his brother in the rose garden near their childhood home, which is also the gravesite of all the other victims of the God's Hand. Agent Doyle is doubtful of the story and decides to handcuff Fenton and drive them both to Fenton's hometown of Thurman, to check on the gravesite. During the drive, Fenton continues his story of how it was their father who received a vision from God when Fenton was young, telling him to kill demons. God would provide the tools and a list of names to his father over the course of a few days. The Meeks boys just thought their dad had dreamt this whole thing up, and this whole thing would go away. But their father then soon tells them God gave him an axe named Otis Berg, a pipe, gloves, and soon starts to tell the boys of names of those who must be destroyed. Fenton is trying to convince Adam to run away, but they don't want to leave their father. The story continues as young Fenton awakes in the middle of the night, seeing his father carrying someone into their backyard shed. Both Fenton and Adam come to the shed, and Fenton pleads with his father not to kill the middle-aged woman. Their father touches the woman on the head, and he goes into convulsions and is frightened. Did he just see the trailer for Batman and Robin? Or did God just grant him a vision of her evil deeds? Despite Fenton's protests, their father kills the woman in front of them with the axe. Adam reveals he believes his father and can see her as a demon, but Fenton cannot. Fenton is in disbelief when his father also tells him that God believes Fenton to be a demon and should also be slayed, but his father believes Fenton will soon start to believe in their righteous cause. As part of his trial, Fenton is forced to dig a large hole for a demon-slaying cellar in their backyard, in which their shed will be on top of it. Fenton ain't got time to bleed, and he finishes the job swiftly. Father then wants Fenton to assist in the slaying of the next demon. In a parking lot in pure daylight, they set their targets on Grandpa Simpson. The father is convinced that God will hide the abduction, and miraculously, they abduct the elderly man and take him to the cellar without anyone noticing. Fenton pleads not to have him killed and runs away to grab the town sheriff. "A Sith Lord?" the sheriff proclaims, and Fenton takes him back to the cellar only to find it empty. Fenton's father then kills the sheriff as Fenton tells the sheriff about the Rose Garden gravesite. The father is furious. He admits he just killed a man, not a demon, and it's Fenton's fault. He locks Fenton in the cellar for days. After days of starvation and dehydration, the father lets Fenton out, and Fenton feigns belief in their righteous mission. After assisting in the abduction of another man, the father wants Fenton to kill the demon. After giving the axe to Fenton, Fenton spins and expertly axe chops his father. Just before his father dies, he whispers something into Adam's ears. Fenton knows exactly what his father said and simply tells Adam, "If you're going to destroy me, promise to bury me in the Rose Garden." Then before Fenton can release the helpless abductee, Adam comes running in with the axe to kill the helpless victim. The story ends with adult Fenton and Agent Doyle arriving at the Rose Garden where Adam and the God's Hand's victims are buried. As Agent Doyle is looking around, he is questioning the story of how Adam would destroy Fenton, yet Adam committed suicide. Fenton then reveals he is in fact Adam, and he did in fact destroy Fenton. Adam touches Agent Doyle on the head and has a vision that Agent Doyle killed his own mom in the past, and Doyle is on God's hit list. Due to the God's hand touching his head, Agent Doyle becomes weak and falls into an open grave. Agent Doyle says Adam won't get away with this as people saw him in the FBI office as they left. But Adam isn't worried. He knew his destiny because the kids always called him Mr. Glass. Adam then kills Agent Doyle. It's later revealed that Adam's presence in the FBI office is obscured by videotape static and people cannot remember his face. Looks like he truly is the God's Hand and is a demon slayer, like his father before him. The end. So, based on that, Jeff, any thoughts on the synopsis, or even considering that, what kind of movie is this for you? A definite psychological thriller? Is this something worthy to see on the big screen, or how simple of a story is this for you?
Well, it sounds pretty simple. It doesn't, from the synopsis, sound much like a psychological thriller. That's what it feels like to be. It feels like a bit of, I might expect it to be more of like a supernatural horror movie, just listening to the synopsis. It seems pretty straightforward just from the synopsis. So yeah, but no, let's do some trivia.
All right. The film was released in 2002 with a budget of $11 million. It only made $17 million worldwide, so you could consider this not really a success by any means. This was released around the time when Mad Mel's We Were Soldiers was out, Blade 2, Ice Age, and strangely enough, the thriller Panic Room, which was released maybe a couple of weeks before this one. And then a couple of weeks after, this was followed by Sam Raimi's Spider-Man a few weeks after that. So not much of a surprise it didn't make a lot of money. The story is loosely based on American serial killer Joseph Callinger, who murdered 3 people with his 15-year-old son. He pleaded sanity, saying God told him to kill these people. Some fan theories out there have speculated why the axe had the name or marking of Otis. I mean, for me, I'll always just think Otisburg, but because why not? But some fans believe this to be an acronym for Only the Innocent Survive. It was actually Paxton's idea to put a name on the axe just to give it a bit more mystery. And as you're aware, Paxton did direct this movie, and we'll talk about how he did as we go through at the end. Paxton originally intended for the demon's crimes to be shown to the audience with the first victim after his character had touched them, but a suggestion from James Cameron was to keep it a surprise for the end. And you may have noticed that Paxton's character was drinking Ham's beer. This beer was pretty popular in the States in the 50s and 60s, but they still have a couple of breweries, but they are not as popular as obviously other beers out there. In fact, this production had trouble procuring more than one can for the production, so they kept reusing the same can in multiple shots. So that's pretty much it.
It's interesting that it went like the release window, because I remember like Panic Room was Fincher's follow-up to Fight Club. So I seem to recall that, with Jodie Foster, it was fairly hotly anticipated. So when you got the hammer of that and the anvil of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, I don't know why you'd choose to release your movie so that must have been April or May, right, of 2002.
Yeah,
I guess you're before.
It's tough for studios too. Who knows who put their slot down first, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So maybe Frailty, said, okay, we're taking this week, and nothing was there, and then all of a sudden, several months later, the year before or whatever it is, then the other movies start claiming their spots, and then you're either kind of stuck to it and committed. I don't know what, who knows what kind of costs there are, but I agree with you. It's if you had the flexibility, and we see movies today move their schedules around, maybe not at the last minute, but these movie schedules half a year to a year in advance.
Well, I think studios now, maybe we just know, maybe it's just more publicized now, but it seems like studios are very, very cognizant of their release dates now. Like they target that date, 2 years out. I mean, of course, movies will often get moved around, but they really do covet certain weekends out there and do consider the scheduling when they want to release it. But, for a film like this, it's a little smaller. I would have expected it to be more of a fall type of movie, not just,
Yeah, this was April. This was April, an April release. Yeah, Spider-Man came out early May.
I think it was May 3rd or something for Spider-Man. But anyway, the other piece of trivia I thought was interesting that you mentioned was James Cameron suggesting that he keep like the reveal of the crimes to the end there. What a different movie this might have been if he had gone with his original idea to reveal the crimes to the audience.
It's kind of interesting because the thing is, we'll get to it, but, at the end of the movie, you have kind of two twists, two surprises in a sense.
Yes, right.
Instead of just the one. So it's kind of interesting that if this movie was just based on the twist that Adam was indeed Fenton and Adam was alive, that's really it. I found the other twist more interesting, the other surprise. So I agree. This was a good choice.
I think it is the right choice, depending on how they would have played it, because then there's a certain amount of irony where if we see it as the audience, so we believe Bill Paxton's character, through the killings, but the kid doesn't see it. So then we're like, well, then we're kind of left guessing, what does the adult Fenton or Adam think about that if he never saw it, but we see it as true through the whole movie? I don't think that would have been a better choice, but it certainly would have been a different experience. That would be interesting to watch a Phantom edit of that, just to compare.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if it was actually when Cameron made the suggestion, if these scenes were actually filmed.
Well, because they did show them, right? They did show the crimes at the end, so you just cut those back earlier in the movie.
Yeah,
I don't know how you'd do that from a dialogue. I don't know how you'd make it differently. It would have been a different experience. There's no question.
Yes. Well, how about we get into this movie? And I agree with you that this movie is more simple. So we can maybe go back with respect to how we used to do it with an act structure. So let's talk about the first act here. We have Matthew McConaughey's character playing Fenton. Even though he's Adam, he's visiting the FBI office. And let's actually, before we can get into it, haven't talked about Powers Booth here, who's playing Agent Doyle. And this guy is a definite character actor. He always seems to play some kind of asshole, villainous character, untrustworthy kind of guy. He plays it very well. Not to say anything mean about the guy. He might be a very nice guy in real life, but he certainly has the look and the voice and the demeanor playing someone you really don't trust.
Yeah. I like Powers Booth, man. He's kind of like a poor man's Tommy Lee Jones, But I can't think of him playing anything other than a cop or an FBI agent.
I don't know him from too many things, except I just remember him in Sin City playing that bad guy.
Oh, right.
Right. So he was playing about kind of a mobster type of guy in Sin City. Yeah, I think he was in Tombstone. Was he in Tombstone?
Yeah, he was in Tombstone. He was one of the bad guys,
he was one of the bad guys
of the Waltons or whatever.
Oh, and also the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, the hockey one. He played kind of like the bad guy, terrorist.
Oh, yeah, that's right. My favorite role of his was in Rapid Fire with Brandon Lee, when he actually played a good guy for a change. He was the cop. It was almost buddy cop-ish between the two of them. And he was the gruff cop, and Brandon Lee was the young kid in Kung Fu. It's actually a pretty cool movie.
That's a rare antiquity for Powers Booth. So
you
should recommend that one time in the distant future.
It could happen.
Yeah, I'd watch that. Powers Booth is a good guy. I got to see that. So, Fenton comes in here, walks into an FBI office. He wants to specifically talk to Agent Doyle. And he says he knows who's the killer of the God's Hand case. And he sits down with Agent Doyle. He says it's his brother, Adam. What did you think of this kind of setup? And you had a couple of scenes where it showed the adult Adam. He's telling the story how he's calling his brother. He's going to say he has got to bury him in the rose garden. And then you see Adam shoot himself. And what do you think of these opening shots here and how this movie's introduced?
Well, I mean, I always put my guard up a little bit when it's a dark and stormy night to open the film, just because it's such a bad cliche. So
I just remember Picard just doing the face palm when he's reading that shitty episode about, what is it, Casino? What was it, The Royale?
The Royale,
it was a dark and stormy night. And then he did the Picard face palm. It was great.
Yeah, great episode. It was...
terrible episode.
Terrible episode, but great episode. I mean, Matthew McConaughey's maybe overdoing it a bit in the FBI office because he's so clearly traumatized, I guess. Like I don't know if it's overly emotional but it's too obvious that there is something amiss here. Something is not as it seems. And I know that's what you go for with a psychological thriller, but I think it was a little bit too overplayed there. The scene with the phone call between the two brothers, I mean, that's fine at this point. Like, that's just sort of showing us what happened, but it's fine. I didn't feel too drawn in by these scenes.
No, neither did I. And you hit the nail on the head right here. Problem here is now you're getting into another trope. And ever since The Usual Suspects came out, when you have somebody coming to admit something like this in a movie in a genre such as this, your guard is automatically up. And it's like, okay, he's not telling the entire truth. There's going to be a twist surrounding this guy, and you're just automatically prepared for it. And I didn't remember the ending in this movie, but I was automatically just saying, because it's also Matthew McConaughey. Now, here's the other thing. This is the problem when you have movies like this again. You've casted Matthew McConaughey in this role. He is not going to be in this role for a guy who's just going to tell the story of the officer in a monotone voice. So you're expecting something else going to happen here. And it'd be interesting if it was just...
That was the first thing I thought. The first thing I thought is like, is he the other brother? Like, that was the first thing I thought. And you're right. It's because you expect a twist and you cast a very prominent actor in the role.
Yeah, and I think that's the unfortunate reality that Hollywood needs to, in general, and they do this in movies even today. I mean, you want to kind of keep your surprises. You need to have obscure actors playing those. You want those obscure twists. You can't be obvious. You can't show your card too early.
That's right.
It's just unfortunate. So he starts to tell now the story, the God's Hand, and wants to tell the story of, Adam, and it's all his dad's fault, and he got the vision from God. And they show this, it's the summer of 79 in a small town of Thurman. Right away, you can tell that this town is a small, conservative, biblical town. I got a kick out of it, and this is where I use the Flanders influence, is the two boys are screaming or singing I got joy, joy, joy.
Yeah.
Down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. And it's like, that was the first thing I wrote down. I was oh my God, it's Rod and Todd.
It is. It's Rod and Todd. That kid gets beat up every single day.
Oh, yeah. These kids need to get beat up, too. What the fuck was going on?
Well, they ended up murdering a bunch of people. So, yeah, they definitely needed to get beat up.
And so, like, these two boys, I should have, done a little bit more research to who they were playing, which actors are playing these boys. But dad is played by, obviously, Bill Paxton here. And there's no mom. She must have died. I can't remember what happened with her. I believe she had died in the past. And yeah, and then, you get to set up a family life. And then very shortly after, like, this movie moves pretty quickly. The dad, in his sleep, he has a vision that God has told him that he and his family have to kill demons, the demons of the world, and they will be God's hand. And he tells his kids in the middle of the night, waking them up, and that's got to be a fucking mind bender for your kids. And I even got a kick that younger Adam believes that they'll end up being like superheroes, right?
Yeah.
They'll toss aside those who are not worthy, just like Batman and Superman in Snyderverse. So Fenton is non-believer here. Adam is, and it's not a surprise. The young kid just wants to believe his dad, and since his dad used the idea of superheroes to hook him in. So there you go. What did you think of this original setup? Like, just right off the bat, we're like maybe 10 minutes into the movie, dad's, woken the kids up, and this is your MacGuffin.
Well, this works for me, actually, because, Bill Paxton kind of sells it. He seems like he's scared and uncertain himself, but he's had this vision. So, he believes it. So I thought that worked great. I thought it worked well to have the boys be on either side of the issue, right? And you're right. It makes sense. The younger kid would be, he wants to believe his dad, but the older guy, the older kid, Fenton, he's too old to buy this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You get the feeling that maybe he wants to, but it's just not ringing for him. So this collection of scenes here, I thought was pretty effective. They create the idyllic small town America. I thought Bill Paxton did a good job with setting that stage. These earlier flashbacks were the higher point of the movie for me. Mm-hmm. From a stylistic perspective, I wrote down it felt old, but it's not that it felt old. It just felt maybe a little more classic, like very simple shot composition.
I was going to say the same thing. The way this was set up, it was very simple. Mm-hmm. It's all exposition. There's not really a lot of stylistic choices here. It's just a simple story of a father and his family. There's nothing really special happening with any of the cinematography or the shots or anything like that. It's just wakes him up, tells him, and then he even starts talking about, God will give him magical weapons later. Yeah. Let's get into it now. What did you think of the magical weapons? So we've got the axe, because now this is actually a really good shot. So it's another day, the kids are thinking that, okay, maybe dad just had a nightmare and it's a bunch of bullshit and it's going to go away. Everything's going to go back to normal. And then Fenton's telling the story of his dad having the vision, and the audience is seeing Bill Paxton's character having the vision as he's driving along. And that was a pretty cool shot where you see the light from the clouds coming in on this farm on the side of the road. He walks in there, and this is where he finds the axe and the gloves. And I believe he finds the pipe, which will now be referred to as the inanimate carbon rod, because everybody loves the rod.
A rod.
What did you think of these scenes and the reveal of these weapons? Were you a bit confused?
No, I don't. It was a cool shot. Heavy-handed, but we're sort of seeing what Fenton is telling the FBI agent, what his father would have told him that he saw. So it was appropriate. That was a little over the top, and that the beam of light coming in through the barn, landing on this axe. At first, I was intrigued why it had a name, Otis. Yeah. But because that was never explored, I wondered why it had the name Otis. That acronym that you mentioned before, notwithstanding. But unless that's only the innocent survive, if that's a thing from Christian mythology, like specifically, okay. But I don't think that it is.
No, it's not. And that's just a fan theory. I don't think it's ever been explained.
That started to bug me later, but the scenes themselves were neat. The trio of weapons, sort of mirrors the Holy Trinity, and there's the three of them. So I thought they were each going to get their own weapon, like that flaming sword that angel had. And
what did you think of that scene when he's in the garage doing the work, and you see that? I guess that stylistic. That's the one real effect shot of the movie, where you see that angel kind of falling. Because there's sparks happening around him when he was working in the garage. The angel comes towards him. I thought that was a pretty cool shot.
Yeah, it was kind of a cool shot, but it also didn't seem too consistent either with the rest of the film. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't sure what to make of it at the time. When I saw that, I'm thinking, okay, well, he's just crazy. Yeah. He's seeing things. So it was a cool shot, but it didn't seem to fit.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's interesting. And now that you mention it, I agree. I think because you really don't get other shots like this. This is really the only time where you see something like that, and it's very biblical, and it's very straight-laced at the audience, and you're seeing what he is actually seeing with respect to God talking to him. Because the other times he's just saying, God talked to me. Now you're actually seeing what he's seeing. Then it's a little inconsistent with the rest of the story. So now that he's got these weapons and he's showing them to the kids, now Fenton's getting a bit more concerned. And again, he's talking to his brother, I want to run away, will you come with me? But they decide they don't, because they don't want to leave their dad. And he's praying to God, or not praying to God, but he's kind of just praying with respect to hope that nothing bad will happen and his dad is just not going to do anything. But then I guess his dad starts to get the list, starts writing names down, and they wake up one night and, he's brought home a middle-aged woman, knocked her over the head with a pipe, and and he calls the kids out, brings them in, and you get your first victim here. So what did you think of these scenes and how it was played out? Because this will really be the end of Act 1.
So I thought this worked fairly well. It was, it's kind of chilling. You have the dad bringing his kids in when he's going to murder this woman. And at this point, I was still asking myself the question, is he crazy or was his vision real? So, when he kind of reaches out to, reveal the demon with his hands, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I thought, well, maybe we will get sort of a vision or something obvious to show us that this is for real.
Is that what you were expecting or hoping?
Well, I wasn't sure. I don't know what I was hoping for. I was hoping but I found myself watching. Mm-hmm. Like I wanted to know what was going on. Like I wanted to know one way or the other. And at first, because he grabs her and she kind of reels back a bit. So at first I'm like, oh, okay, it is real. But then you watch it a little bit more and she's just terrified. So I'm like, okay, well, did something happen there or not?
He actually shakes and convulses a little bit.
Yeah, he shakes and convulses. So he could just be crazy.
Right.
So I thought that was played fairly well. His performance sold that well because then we still don't know. You could take it either way from there. So it's good that they kind of kept it under wraps still at this point. Mm-hmm. It's pretty chilling. The dude's got an axe murder this lady. So
yeah, right in front of the kids. So
yeah,
that's the interesting thing. So after he kills the woman, young Adam says, I could see what you see, Dad. I saw the demon. And Fenton obviously did not. And that's the crux of the movie. Not the crux of the movie. That's the main meat and potatoes of what's driving the conflict for the rest of the movie. So this is really the end of Act 1 here. So now based on this endpoint, you've already mentioned you're intrigued, because you're still wondering if it's real or if he's just crazy. Aside from that, based on the setup, the way this movie's filmed, these characters, what are your thoughts here at this point?
Yeah, at this point, a few things. Once they go back, I wasn't all that taken with Powers Booth or Matthew McConaughey. So when we got away from them, and basically we find out that this movie's actually about the kids. Mm-hmm. Really, they're the main characters.
Yeah.
I thought that the kids were pretty decent when it came to performances.
Yeah, I thought they did a fantastic job, actually.
Yeah, and that's tough. As we've discussed before on the show, that's a really tough thing to do, is to get good performances out of kids. The one kid's a little older, so that's the age where you can start to do a little better. But the younger kid, I thought he did a really good job. Stylistically, again, everything's very simple. I thought it fit the tone at this point. So yeah, I'm getting more drawn into it now that we're back in time. I was hoping for a little bit more out of Bill Paxton's performance. Not that, it was appropriate for what he was doing, but, I always get excited to see him. So I want him to blow the doors off, right?
But I think at this point, he's playing kind of a really straightforward guy who's just had this vision. And if he goes more reserved or more, which is more stalker, kind of like silent serial killer level, or over dramatic Joker level, crazy, then I think you might lose something there. So I think there's something to him just playing it simple.
He needs to play it how he's playing it. There's no question. You couldn't go further in either direction, but perhaps this is where we see some of Bill Paxton's limitations as a performer, because there isn't a lot of small stuff. There isn't a lot of nuance here. Then you can kind of go in deeper where he is. Mm-hmm. He doesn't need to go outside, like, to the left or to the right, playing more conservative or crazier, because that wouldn't work. We need him to go deeper into where he's at. That's not Bill Paxton's wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. Bill Paxton's big. He's stealing scenes. He's chewing scenery. He's not this quiet guy. So an interesting choice for him to choose this role for himself. Mm-hmm. As the director. Certainly capable. I'm with it so far.
Yeah, I'm with it so far too. I completely agree with you that, getting away from the adult Fenton, who is Adam, and then also Agent Doyle, they weren't really much of the focus anyways. That's just to kickstart the movie. Once you really get knowing it's really about the kids and the relationship with their dad, and I think that's where the strength of this movie lies, at least in this first act. So let's move into Act 2. Really, the bulk of this act here is the killings. So we have the abduction of the elderly man in the mall, and then we have the sheriff, as Fenton has just had enough and grabs the sheriff. So let's talk about these two ones here first. So with the elderly man, What was your take of them getting away with it in daylight? Did you find this saying, what the fuck is going on? And it's just because, did they just get lucky, or did this kind of intrigue you that they managed to abduct this guy in a mall parking lot with nobody finding them, nobody noticing at all? And that's because Bill Paxton's character is saying God's going to protect us because we're demon slayers.
Well, yeah, I think it fits with what they're trying to do, which is make you wonder what's real. I think even though they get away with it, I mean, I'm starting to lean towards now that it's, they're not slaying demons. They're just killing people because dad's crazy. Getting away with it in the mall parking lot. Yeah, that didn't bother me. Shit, people love looking the other way.
That's true. So. Yeah, that is true. This is the States. It's okay. No problem.
I didn't see nothing. Move along. That was okay. When he's digging that hole.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So now, but I think that's after the sheriff. So let's talk about the sheriff. So he brings the elderly man home, right? I believe that's the hole came first. You're right. So the hole came first after the first murder. Because Bill Paxton says that God says that, Fenton, you're actually a demon, but I have faith in you, but you're going to have to, do a trial. You're going to have to do something for us. And he digs that hole, which will become the cellar, and they'll roll the shed over it. What did you think of those scenes? And then they had the abduction. They brought the elderly man home into that cellar. And then he ran away to go grab the sheriff. So what did you think about that?
The whole thing with building the hole, I thought, was pretty effective. Borderline child abuse, I guess, but
that comes later.
Yeah. I guess if you're ready to axe bash a guy's face in, telling your kid to dig a hole, but a big hole. What I liked about the hole, after he's done digging it, it's complete, because he was, the dad was telling him to pray, right, while he was digging the hole, and finished the hole. And he's like, I bet you didn't pray a single time, did you? And he's such a stubborn little brat. But we're also on his side because we're believing that, Fenton's the one telling the story. So I thought that was played fairly well. Again, good performance by the kid. In real life, he doesn't have any skin left on his palms, but other than that,
that's gotta hurt. I just do I'm trying to plant like a fucking one plant in my garden in my backyard, and it's like my hands are ballooned up to the size of watermelons. It's like fucking blisters. I don't know how this kid managed to do that massive cellar.
They made them differently back in those days, I guess. So you could dig a hole.
Yeah, that's true. Probably also set the record for the number of times hole has been mentioned on a podcast. So get me out of this hole.
A record we will seek to break someday, but that'll be a different conversation.
So he goes, grabs the sheriff with the elderly man about to be killed, or he did just get axed. He says he runs away, grabs the sheriff, tells him the story. Sheriff doesn't believe him, comes back, and then Fenton's dad kills him. And the interesting thing here is that you made me kill an actual man, not a demon, because the sheriff is not a demon with respect to what God thinks or the God's hand thinks. So what'd you think of that revelation when he said that?
Because then it's interesting, right? Because if he's crazy and if he's delusional and he kills the sheriff, then would his delusion, the sheriff was a demon as well. Like if he was delusional, he might justify it that way. But his delusion's more complex than that. If he is delusional to say, no, he wasn't a demon. So, and he was clearly shook up by it. He was throwing up after he killed him. So, again, I think
these are still the traits of a psychopath.
Well,
because they're very particular.
They're not the traits of a psychopath, because the psychopath wouldn't be delusional. He just wouldn't care, right? The psychopath wouldn't feel anything for killing this man. He wouldn't care. He's just doing it because he can do it, right? He gets the thrill out of it. But a delusional man, that would be a little bit different. So what fits the delusion? In this case, it's either, in his delusion, he's killing demons and then he killed the sheriff because he had to continue with his mission, or it's actually real. So I'm just trying to remember how I was kind of going along. And I think I was still on the edge of thinking that it was part of his delusion.
Does this change here, Revelation? Does this raise your eyebrows a little bit more? Is it more interesting now that this happened? He had this reaction to killing the sheriff?
Is it more interesting now? Yeah, I think so. But I think also he would have just run away at this point.
Who would have run away?
Well, I guess they locked him in the cellar at this point, didn't they? Fenton.
Yeah, the sheriff got killed. The dad blames him for killing a real man, not a demon. Locks him in there for days. I mean, I know Adam comes and gives him water through some of the bases in the woodwork there, but a few days later, Fenton's pretty much near death there, and gets him out of there and then, gives him food, gives him water, and Fenton feigns to believe that Fenton's had a change of heart. In reality, he's feigning that he believes in the mission now. And then they go abduct this white trash loser who probably is the one true person who deserved to get abducted, at least from a dramatic perspective. I mean, the other people were revealed later in the movie to have committed terrible crimes as well, but this guy right off the bat's just a grade A loser, treating his wife like trash, and he just looks like a guy who just deserves to get worked. Seriously. And Fenton helps his dad knock him out unconscious, and they take him back, and this is where the interesting thing happens here. So Fenton's dad wants him to do the final killing blow, gives him the axe. Fenton dramatically, after classic Shatner pause, does a spin turn on him and whacks his dad with the axe right in the chest, chops him down for good. She might as well have just said, stick around. You could have done that as well. So what did you think of these scenes? And then also the dad is passing away. He whispers something the audience cannot hear, but you pretty much know what he's saying to Adam and that conversation. What are your thoughts?
The abduction was good. At this point, again, I guess he must have done a good job playing up the ambiguity, because we see the guy come out of his house and he's yelling at his wife, and you can tell this guy's just a slimy piece of human garbage. And so I'm thinking, all right, well, maybe they are killing demons, or at least bad hombres, as Donald Trump would say. That was interesting there. It helps the ambiguity a little bit. You can't go too far in either direction with the small clues they're giving you. I mean, I thought Fenton was going to axe the redneck dude and not turn the axe on his old man there.
So that was a nice surprise for you.
Yeah, that was a good surprise for me. And I also like the surprise of, as he rips the duct tape off the dude's head, and then you see the crazed small child Adam with the axe coming right towards the camera.
You could say that God willed him to lift that thing, but my goodness, that young kid like that's not going to be able to do any damage with that axe.
Well, as long as you can lift it up, gravity kind of does the rest. Depends how sharp it is, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just like the shot.
Yeah, you just like the shot because it's a nice little surprise. No, I liked this scene. I wouldn't say it caught me too much off guard, because I was the whole movie's kind of led up to, the audience is led up to believe that Fenton's a non-believer and that he's going to help stop. He goes as far as calling the cop, the sheriff, and then he gets locked away. So, I mean, anyone who does that to me, I'd probably do the same thing to them, right? I mean, this guy's just crazy, like his father. So he's got to be stopped, no matter what the cost is. Just like Optimus Prime. Megatron must be stopped no matter the cost. So
we didn't have the sweet rock organ to accompany that axe slaying there.
Yeah, you should have that.
We should edit that. That would be awesome.
Yeah, you could have done that too. But yeah, I like this scene, and but what really caught me off guard was the fact that Adam came in and just finished the job. But I love the interaction between Fenton and Adam there after his dad passes away. He just says, "Okay, if you're gonna destroy me, just promise me to bury me in the rose garden." And I think Adam says something along the lines of, "I promise I will," or something like that.
Well, he says like, "Oh yeah, I'm definitely." It wasn't so much okay. It was more of like, "You're goddamn right, I'm burying you in the rose garden."
Yeah, that was pretty fucking awesome. I love that. Yeah. I love that scene there. So then we kind of cut away back to the present, where with adult Fenton and Agent Doyle arriving at the rose garden in Thurman. So this is kind of like we've passed the end of Act 2 and Act 3 based on the movie structure because it's so simple. We're pretty much almost near the end of the movie. We talk about, unless I'm missing something, I can't recall if I'm missing any scenes here, but I believe that it's just them having a discussion at the Rose Garden and Agent Doyle's kind of running through this whole story again. He's seeing an open grave there. And he says that, and he's kind of questioning that if Adam promised to kill Fenton, but Adam committed suicide, he's questioning that whole story. What did you think of the revelation? And I was really disappointed in this. It's just like, they kind of just simply, like Matthew McConaughey just kind of blurts it out, well, what happens if I'm Adam?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it.
It was a bit anticlimactic because it was an idea that I'd had right at the start of the movie. Mm-hmm. That was indeed the case.
And you know what gave it away too earlier is when, before the drive out to the town, as they left the FBI office, I don't know if you noticed, but Agent Doyle was he had handcuffed.
Grab his head there?
Yeah, grab his head there, and Fenton moved his head away. He didn't want to be touched. or have any contact with the agent there. So that, to me, the minute that happened, I said, okay, this movie already gave away its main clue. This guy is Adam, and he is the God's hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously he did that on purpose because, again, psychological thrillers try to telegraph what's going to happen, but in a way that you can't, that's not going to be immediately noticeable to the audience.
This was so noticeable.
Yeah, it was extremely noticeable. I mean, I noticed it right away.
So when you saw that happen earlier in the film, and I should have mentioned it earlier,
I knew that there was going to be a reason why he didn't want to be touched, but at that point, I didn't know that, you could reveal the demon by touching it, right?
Oh, yes.
So I was just like, okay, well, obviously that's a detail that's coming back later. So once it became apparent, I mean, about halfway through the movie, I made the note down here and I just asked myself, is this FBI agent, is he like the last demon on his list? Mm-hmm. Because it just seemed like he was luring him there. So, that's the twist where he's his brother. Yeah, he's just like, well, what if I'm not Fenton? I'm actually Adam. I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't know if there need to be like a big buildup of music and then a crackle of thunder in the background while he said it.
Well, it's like when Palpatine revealed himself to Anakin. It's just like...
Yeah. It's like, no, I'm... Lord. I'm the Sith Lord, yeah.
It's like almost comical. It's how simple it is. It's like, that's it? That was the reveal?
I almost prefer the Scooby game coming along and unmasking the villain, grabbing the guy's rubber mask off his face, Mission Impossible style. That would have been more fun, but it's not really what they do.
No. Anyway. So, I mean, I'm 100% agree with you. I felt this was completely the way it was structured, and it was so anticlimactic. It was just... They could have done something different here. I think Paxton could have done something with the direction, and the writing could have been a little better. And I think also... I hate to say it again, not a fan of Matthew McConaughey. I know this is one of his more earlier roles, but he's just playing it so monotone and straight, and there's nothing, I guess that's kind of, you could say that's somewhat accurate of the character he's trying to portray, but it just comes across as just so dry. It's just I don't care about this reveal. Mm-hmm. It's just what happens if I'm Adam? Yeah, I'm Adam. And then
yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Then the movie cuts away to showing how, because he touches Agent Doyle, and Agent Doyle strangely becomes weak, and I don't understand why, because the other victims, I don't believe they became weak. I know they were tied up and gagged, but what happened with Agent Doyle here? He just touched his head, and all of a sudden he, loses all strength in his legs, and he just collapses. Yeah, I didn't understand this.
The power of Jesus in you.
Yeah, it's the power of Jesus.
There's reasons, man. That's why.
Yeah, that's why. I thought that was really weak. I didn't like how this whole thing played out, and as Agent Doyle has collapsed from his weakness, it's revealed that he killed his mom for that vision. The audience sees it, and they show the story of how Fenton, or Adam, actually killed his brother Fenton. And I guess the last shot is that scene here is Adam who's now Matthew McConaughey is now revealed to be Adam, stands over Agent Doyle, kills him, and then Agent Doyle says, well, you can't get away with it, just before he dies. So many people saw you leave the FBI office. They know I'm with you. And he goes, don't worry, God will protect me. So after the death of Agent Doyle, we see the FBI agents wondering what happened to Agent Doyle, and they get up the lead because Fenton, he has framed his brother for being the God's hand, and they go to Fenton's house. They see Fenton's dead, and they see all the lists there, and Agent Doyle's name was on that list as well, and then they're saying, but then who was the guy who was at the police station? And they said, okay, we can find it through the surveillance footage, and all the footage is static and can't see anything. And that's how, what did you think of that?
It's, earlier details coming back to pay off, right? Where we sort of see the full extent of how right the father was. God's tinkering with the tapes and sort of erasing people's memories. So, that's fine. It's the full revelation of the truth, which is that it was all of it. Right. All of it was real.
And then this is where that second surprise is that you find that these visions were in fact real.
Yeah.
And not just the Fenton is Adam. It's that these visions, all of this was real. God did tell him to kill these demons, and all these people were actually evil people who had done evil deeds. And then the movie ends. The FBI says, okay, well, we got to contact his brother, who is revealed now to be a sheriff of Thurman. They go see Adam, and he explains, about what happened to his brother and all that stuff. And then as he leaves, the sheriff, Adam, shakes the FBI agent's hands and says, oh, you're a good person. And that's because, that FBI agent probably hasn't committed any sins. And the movie ends there, and it seems like he has a girlfriend who works in his office, and she's in on it, and the movie just ends. That's it. What did you think of that? How this movie ended? the final twists here and then the quick ending afterwards and how it wrapped up?
I mean, I was satisfied with the revelation that it was all real the whole time. Because they played it well throughout the movie, it all added up. I don't think that anything was inconsistent, so I was fine with that.
Did you not see most of this coming? And that's something that I want to say is, for me, even though I had seen it before and then some pockets and little nuggets were in my head and might have kind of alerted me about these spoilers, but to me it just seems so telegraphed, both of these twists.
Yeah, they were telegraphed. I think my most likely expectation was that they were going to kind of keep it really, really ambiguous. And then at the end, there would be some shot where he like kind of looks knowingly into the camera or something stupid like that, where we're left wondering if it was all real or not.
Just like the end of Michael Jackson's Thriller video. He just turns around and he's like the demon.
Yeah, exactly like the end of Michael Jackson's Thriller. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, he turns to the camera. Matthew McConaughey's got green eyes. And then moonwalks back into the police station.
With Vincent Price laughing, right? So.
That would have been a good ending. So I guess I'm glad that they just went all the way. Like there wasn't any ambiguity. They did the whole thing, so that was satisfying, if not unpredictable. But again, like we talked about the genre, you can't really do anything unpredictable anymore. It's almost completely impossible.
No, and I think that's part of the times we live in now too, is you just expect twist upon twist upon twist. So all these cases are already running through your mind after Act 1. And dollars to donuts, you're going to get pretty close to the answer. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In a movie such as this. And that's a shame. There's been so many movies that kind of replicate the same formula that we're now used to it and expect these kind of things that the audience really can't be as surprised anymore about anything. That's too bad. So that does it for Frailty. So let's just talk about the performances here. So we have Bill Paxton, we have Matthew McConaughey, we have Powers Booth, we have the kids. Who's the real standout performances for you? Anyone who disappointed you? Did you expect more? What are your thoughts on the act?
Yeah, as I've touched on already, I think the kids were the standout performers here. I thought they did, both of them, a very good job all the way through. I mean, I'm not going to say I was overly disappointed with anybody's performance. Powers Booth is Powers Booth. He gives you what he gives you. That's why you hire the guy, right? That's what you hire character actors for. Matthew McConaughey is certainly capable of much more, but again, he's not really the star of the show either. He's there just telling the story. And Bill Paxton, it's an odd choice. Like that role's not what we're used to out of him. So maybe a little bit disappointed with that. Could he have chosen somebody other than himself to play that role? Like, could Matthew McConaughey have been the dad? That might have been more interesting. And then Bill Paxton wouldn't have been in the movie at all, and then just have some other dope as...
And I think that would have been the better choice. And it's not because Bill Paxton did a terrible job. As I said, it's just nothing special. And if he went in one extreme or the other, either too silent or too crazy, then I don't think it would have been the right choice. But I think if you had Matthew McConaughey play that role and the unknown playing Fenton in the FBI office, an unknown actor, was still capable of acting, but he's not a star. You're not expecting anything with him, and then he ends up being the twist. I think that could have been a more interesting choice and maybe preserved a little bit more of the surprise.
Yeah, because then you can use an actor's name to play against to help you fool the audience. The name recognition or lack thereof to help fool your audience. And that's sometimes what you need stars for now, especially when you're doing a psychological thriller.
As I said, also, or they could have gone the complete extreme. You could have had Sylvester Stallone be Fenton, my brother could have been Arnie, and Bruce Willis could have been the dad. Or some combination of that, and you just keep people guessing.
We would have kept people scratching their heads, that's for sure.
How are these people related?
That's a weird suggestion, man. That's a really weird one.
Hey, man, I believe it.
I'd watch it. I don't know that I'd believe it.
I returned and I found out my son was a nerd. So anything else on Frailty here? How about the direction now? How about, because this is Bill Paxton's directorial debut. He's mentioned a couple times, it's a very simple, straightforward movie. I mean, we're at record time of finishing a movie on the podcast here, I think.
Yeah.
So this is very straightforward, and I really couldn't have broken it down because I don't think there'd be any more value breaking down scene by scene. We pretty much covered practically everything that happened in the movie. That's how quick it is. And what did you think of the way the story was drawn out and the way Paxton was able to effectively manage these scenes with respect to how dramatic it would have been and how it played out there?
Yeah, you've got a tough job as a director making a movie like this because, you don't have a lot of tools in your toolbox for, what's basically a pretty small film. small in scope anyway. So the tools that, are in your toolbox when you're making something like this is shot composition, lighting, soundtrack, performance, and writing. That's kind of all you have to work with here. You don't have hyper stylized action or special effects or big budget, high concept stuff. Like you've got small things, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not trying to say that's a bad thing. In many cases, that can be a good thing. But the fewer tools you have, the better director you kind of need. Somebody who has a lot of talent to manage small stuff like that. It was certainly a capably made movie, but nothing added to really much of anything. So was it his goal just to kind of play it simple and straight so that we're guessing to the end? Maybe that was his intention. And in some ways he was successful there, but it never really elevated itself in any way there because he just really didn't do too much, and when you're going to be minimalist like that, I think you need to really be smart and talented with your minimalism. And I think it was technically capable, but just didn't pop,
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It didn't pop, and you had to probably keep it very simple, as you said, use the word minimalist. Maybe that was his intention, to play out the surprises a little. So that was the pop, was the surprise, because it's such a simple movie and there's nothing, that's kind of too shocking up to then with respect to twists. So maybe that is what the whole, I should say, that's the climax of the movie, but maybe that's really your shock value. He's just playing it off that, and maybe that's more effective that way. It's hard to argue for or against that point because the way this movie is structured and the story it's telling, there's not really much else you can do. But with respect to cinematography, shots, there were a couple of nice shots. I mentioned the farm where he finds the axe and the gloves. Even when adult Adam, feigning to be Fenton, and Agent Doyle arrive at the gravesite or in the rose garden, there were some nice shots through the fog, but it looked very simple as well. It just looked like a fog machine on a soundstage, and it looked like somebody's first time directing, and maybe he chose this story because this was his debut and it was not too complicated for him to gain this kind of experience. Then he kind of played it safe, and that's kind of how I would use the direction in this movie. It was safe.
Yeah.
And that's too bad. I can't recall if he tried directing anything else. I'd be surprised if he did, but if he did, I'd like to see how he managed to evolve beyond what we see here. But unfortunately, it was just nothing too special.
I feel like this would have made a good episode of The X-Files.
Yeah, that's kind of a thought I had too, is when I watched this. This felt like kind of like a TV movie, science fiction episode, TV show, something X-Files, Supernatural, something along those lines where it's just like kind of something weird. X-Files is your best bet there. Twilight Zone. I agree completely. It felt like a TV episode. There's nothing really special that's going on here with the soundtrack, with the cinematography, with any special effects. There's nothing here. It's just very straightforward and simplistic.
He did direct after this. He didn't do much. But what I thought was the most interesting part or piece of the film is there's a bit of ambiguity when it comes to good and evil here. So yes, we are led to believe that these are demons that they're slaying. But really at no point is Matthew McConaughey as Adam portrayed as heroic, especially at the end, the way they shoot him and the way that he plays it at the end. This is still a guy who
they played him as kind of still a stalker. I think that's more of the way the movie has to be presented to the audience with respect to the thriller. He's got to be standing over him with the axe to deliver that final blow. It can't be like more of, I'm saving the world by removing you from it. You know what I mean? Instead, they went the traditional horror route.
I just think it's an interesting comment on the type of God that they're saying this God is. This is an Old Testament God. I think they are. This is the Old Testament God.
You can interpret
this isn't Jesus turning the other cheek or anything like that. This is a God who doesn't give two shits about Miranda rights, due process, or any of that shit. Go get that motherfucker. Yeah, well,
justice must be served.
You're not getting far with an axe named Otis in your hands, though, dude.
I got my gun named Otis Bird.
You're getting capped quick. For sure. But pretty boy like Matthew McConaughey, that he could be walking down the middle of Bain Street with that thing dripping wet blood off of it, and people wouldn't stop him.
All the ladies would still want to just say, first of all, he wouldn't be wearing a shirt.
No, he would not.
He'd be all oiled up.
He'd be glistening.
He'd be glistening, and he'd just let the girls just come right all over him.
Yeah, he'd be just
trying to flex his pecs.
Well, yeah.
And then twirling his Lincoln car keys, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and monologuing into the camera. I thought that was interesting, like, because if they're saying that God is real, then it's it's the vengeful, angry God, because it's not heroically played at the end there. I thought that was the most interesting thing. They don't really go anywhere with.
I agree with that. Someone can interpret it that way. I just don't think that the filmmakers are trying to make that statement. This is just kind of just the end capping scene of a psychological thriller, and ta-da, he's the killer, and
no, but it
show him menacing over him, and
even if it's not menacing, but it is still God telling him to do it.
But if you look at how Paxton, then maybe there is more nuance to Paxton's performance here, because if you look at the way Paxton played it, he played it like he was trying to save the world by removing these demons.
Yeah, he was more heroically.
He was more heroic. He's playing it more on that level.
Yeah.
Matthew McConaughey just looked like an evil fuck.
He looked like a serial killer. He looked like Christian Bale sort of in American Psycho. Like just that cold, soulless, blank stare.
So, Matthew McConaughey in real life. He's playing himself.
The shell of Matthew McConaughey after his soul was sucked out by Tom Cruise.
No, but I'm just saying that's the difference. That's what I mean is I would expect the consistency to be where if they're trying to make a statement still, like if Paxton's character was playing like Matthew McConaughey through the whole thing, then I think what you're saying makes more sense. I just think because this is the end of the movie and that's your surprise, and you got that top-down shot of Matthew McConaughey standing over him, and he's going to deliver that death blow. He looks like, Jason or Michael Myers at that point without the mask. That's your horror shot, and that's for dramatic purposes only. So I understand where you're coming from. I just don't think that the filmmakers and Bill Paxton is trying to make that statement.
I disagree. I think you're wrong.
Okay, feel free to disagree. I don't think they're trying to say anything about...
I feel free to disagree, and I may axe murder you for it.
Okay, if you get your axe, if you're going to destroy me...
I'll make sure it says Otis Berg.
That's, I was just going to say that. I want Otis Berg on the weapon.
I will bury you in the Rose Garden.
In William Shatner's Rose Garden.
Yeah, I'll bury you in William Shatner's Rose Garden. I'm sure he'll be cool.
There I can find peace. That does it for today's episode, Frailty. So just before we end here then, Geoff, let's give your final thoughts and recommendations then. Do you recommend this movie? Is it a rare antiquity?
My recommendation's kind of meh. It was not a bad film at all, but I don't know. I think there's better examples of the psychological thriller. So if you're a fan of Bill Paxton, and who isn't, then if you want to see him do something a little bit different, sure, but And as far as rare antiquity goes, no, I don't think so. There's nothing really innovative here or noteworthy. So, this film is overlooked, and I think that having watched it now, I understand why.
Yeah, I think I'm in mostly agreements with you. It's not a terrible film by any means, but it is not special enough to say it warrants a must-see watch. So my recommendation is on the meh side. I'd say almost more or less not recommend and not a rare antiquity. So that does it for this show now. So the episode is done. Frailty is not... Frailty was not very good, and I think we agree. So, Geoff.
Yeah.
Care to enlighten us what's happening?
You're so proud of yourself, too. It's really sweet.
This is how I fly, man.
Keep on keeping on, man.
What's happening next time? What do you got in store for us?
Well, Mr. Glass, we are going to take a look at M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable.
Okay. We're going straight from psychological thriller to psychological thriller.
Yeah, I figure why not? Let's see if we can get a streak going here.
I think there's quite a number of similarities between the two movies here.
You know what? Now that you say, I think you would be correct. And that is not what I had intended, because I had kind of picked this movie before I watched Frailty. But hey, coincidences.
Unbreakable it is. Until next time. Thanks for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Cheers.